License costs are skyrocketing. Enterprises and governments are in turmoil. The future is uncertain. Where can we turn for the solutions to the VMware crisis? Let's meet the Microsoft solutions we need right now. I'm Michael Richardson, CTO of Dynamic Consultants Group, and your host for this exciting podcast series. I'm happy to introduce Jaromir Kaspar, Microsoft MVP and the owner, founder of MS Labs. Jaromir, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for the introduction. So, yeah, I'm based in Czech Republic, and I'm author of the MS Lab. I worked in Microsoft for 9.5 years, and it was my project to basically share my learning path to the PowerShell, and then to share all of this code that I wrote. And I also started with another project on a GitHub that we will talk about maybe. Where you can start with a Hyper-V. So yeah, I spent 9.5 years in Microsoft as a PFE. So PFE was a role where I was visiting customers quite a lot and helping customers with more or less Hyper-V, and I was also in a client. And then I joined Dell in GEOS, Global Engineering Outreach Specialist Group. And then what we do, we are a specialist who basically anyone can ask for help. So if anyone internally is doing some business with Azure Stack HCI, we are here to help, right? So basically to just make sure that the business will continue to happen, and then the customers will be happy. So even if, for example, there are some deployments of Azure Stack HCI, and then technicians, need to help, they're even asking us, right? Because we know deeply how the products are working. And, because of our experience, we know kind of broadly how Microsoft portfolio works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been neat to see how your role really dovetails into the MS Labs, and there's been so many times that I've seen questions asked and the answer is, oh well, check out this MS Labs thing that answers your question. It's been neat, but let me back up and just ask kind of the broader question. What's your perspective on what's going on with VMware right now? What's going on? Why should organizations care? And kind of what's been your experience over the last 6-9 months?
So my experience is that the customers are coming to us, asking about Hyper-V, about Azure Stack HCI, just because what's happening in the VMware world. So I don't know many details because I'm not using VMware. I'm just, hearing all of these questions from the customers where they are asking about, is this feature available in Hyper-V? How we want to start with Hyper-V. We are VMware administrators. Where to start with, learning about Hyper-V? We need to do some deep dive. We need to rapidly, understand what's going on with the Hyper-V, how it works, what's just the HCI, and usually they just want to take a look at alternatives, right? They want to explore what is available on the market to be able to back off from the VMware. So that's what we see.
Yeah, great. So that's you have a really unique perspective because you're really seeing the inroads that as people are starting to make those migrations, starting to do proofs of concept and things like that. If you were talking to somebody that they're at a VMware shop today, they've got a really extensive VMware deployment maybe, and that's where their skill set is. What would you say to them if they said, Jaromir, how do I get started with Hyper-V and Azure Stack HCI? Like, where should I start?
Okay, so I specifically for this, I wrote Dell GEOS GitHub. So we do have if you just Bing for or Google for Dell GEOS GitHub, you will find a URL where I wrote hands-on labs for exploring a MS Lab, so you can deploy machines in your Hyper-V, in your laptop, in your Windows 10, Windows 11 Professional Edition that contains Hyper-V, or Windows Server if you have any lab. And from there, you can start, deploying Azure Stack HCI cluster. Basically, there's a step-by-step guide on the cloud deployment. And also you can explore, there are some admin guides you can explore, for example, deployment of the operating system using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. And yeah, there are multiple things that I would like to now also expand. But yeah, it's more or less like an insight into the Microsoft world, where you know start with the Active Directory, PowerShell. There are some scenarios with the certification authority, you know, failover clustering. It's big, right? But for starting with the Hyper-V, absolutely go to the Dell Geos GitHub, take a look there. There's a hands-on lab for cloud deploying Azure Stack ACI 23H2. You can start there. And then it depends what you know, right? So if you are more into the Azure, you can start exploring the Azure portal, how it looks like there after the deployment. So you have there the Azure Stack ACI cluster, you have the resource bridge. You can then start creating virtual machines, all of this. And if you are more or less like a admin in a Windows world, you can just go back into the infrastructure, open the Hyper-V Manager, failover cluster manager, and look around how it's done, and then look back into the code. Because there are some more examples on how to deploy Azure Stack ACI. For example, 22H2 was completely different. Um, you had to deploy it with a step-by-step guide where you were configuring networks, configuring all of these steps. So you can look into the code and just kind of try to figure out how everything works. And always you can ask in Slack. So there's a really, really good Slack channel where it's like 2,500 people. And you can ask there, and there will be always someone who will try to explain you anything.
Yeah,
More or less,
that's
yeah. If you will go into the forums, right? If you like a Reddit about Hyper-V, usually the information there is not that good, right? Or if you'll go into, I don't know, if you just Google for something for the Hyper-V, the information there is not that good, right? But absolutely, if you will go into the Slack, you'll always find someone who is using Hyper-V extensively. And you can even ask questions like, hey, is there anyone using, I don't know, thousands and thousands of virtual machines? And there will be always someone, right?
yep. Yep. Yeah, that's great. That is a great community, and that's something that I'll share that link to that Slack channel. I mean, experts from all around the world that have worked with every different facet of Hyper-V and Azure Stack HCI in depth in enterprise environments. It's really a great resource.
And you realize that it's not about a Hyper-V anymore, right? It's more or less about the ecosystem around the Hyper-V. So either you will go the old way, where, for example, some guys are using, for example, old stuff like MDT to provision virtual machines or images for the virtual machines, and then you have a script to basically deploy virtual machines or refresh the virtual machines, for example, for the session host, for the AVD, right? Or you can go with I forgot it, what I wanted to say, but yeah, there are so many experts in this area, so absolutely go
Yeah.
there, ask questions, and yeah, the people are running crazy infrastructures like that.
Yeah. So let's go back to the simple basics of getting started. I know you brought up the Geos repository, which is a great place to start.
Hmm.
And you talked about those labs, and we've talked a little bit about MS Labs. So it in some sense, it sounds a little bit complicated to get started, but I know that you can get started very simply with Hyper-V. I mean, on a Windows laptop, you can turn on the feature and then there's Hyper-V, right on your laptop. But
Right.
you have a lot of things in like MS Labs. Talk to me about how easy it can be to get started, even with some of these complex scenarios.
Right. So the first thing you want to do to learn MS Lab, and they'll just GitHub has a guide on how to start with MS Lab, right? But it's just a bunch of scripts. It's just one zip file that you will download. In the zip file, there are 5 files, I think. It's like 1, 2, 3. So what you will do is right-click on the file and select Run with PowerShell. In Windows 11, it's a little bit, tricky. You have to go in the more options and just then run with the PowerShell. But it's more or less like right-click and run with PowerShell, and it will guide you through, right? The first script will just create some folders, download some DSC stuff. The second script will ask you for the ISO file. So first thing you will just do is grab somewhere the ISO file for Windows Server 2016, 2019, 2022, whatever, 2025 now, right? And try it with it 2025, maybe, and then it will create a basic for the lab, right? And this basic for the lab is basically exported domain controller and then parent disks. So the next thing you will do is run deploy script, and it will deploy the basic lab with some Windows servers and one, I think, for Windows servers 2022. If you selected 2022, otherwise it will just tell you, hey, I don't have a disk parent disk. But it will create you a lab with the domain controller and some machines so you can start with, right? And then you can start exploring the world of the MS Lab by, starting with some labs in Delgio's GitHub. And when you will get used to that, you can go back into the MS Lab and then more or less copy lab config that will, give you a list of the virtual machines that should be created. And then there is a scenario.ps1 script, which is basically a script where if you log in into the management machine or domain controller, you can start pasting, section by section and just read the code and learn something new.
Yeah. So that's really amazing that you can get started with an entire, Active Directory and some host machines, all with just right-clicking and running a few scripts. Because to do this, and the same is true in any other tool. Like to do virtualization at scale, there's a lot of moving pieces and dependencies. But the labs, I mean, it's literally right click and run a couple times, and now I have a fully working lab environment with all the dependencies ready to go. And so now I can actually start clicking in and seeing, okay, how does Hyper-V work? How does Azure Stack HCI work? And start getting a feel for the technology. So that's really neat that you can do that with.
There are multiple labs
that are
like this, right?
Yeah.
There are multiple labs. So this is like a Swiss knife, right? It cannot do anything. There are more labs that can do deployment of the system center products and crazy stuff, right? They have it's like a module, so you can download the script as a module and then use it within the PowerShell as a module. But intention of the MS Lab was like a Swiss knife, to have just a few files and then clicking. You don't want to go into the PowerShell and just type anything. You want to right click, run with PowerShell, right? So this was the base idea. Like I wanted to have a tool that is absolutely simple for anyone just to start with.
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of people, when they hear, oh, I need to start running PowerShell scripts and doing this, it sounds scary, but it's really not. It's not like we're asking you to write a bunch of PowerShell commands to get started. It's just so easy to get started when it's already scripted out for you, and it's just right click run, and there
the next
it is.
thing you want to do is modify the lab your way and just trying to figure out how to do it your way by just reusing some script and modifying it. And this is what you will use to learn, right? So it will be steep learning curve if you get into it. But this is how it works, right? Now, when I write a scenario, I more or less go and then copy stuff from somewhere, right? I know that I was doing, I don't know, creating of the virtual machines in one scenario. So there's like one scenario called Azure Stack HCI and bulk VM creation, something like that. So you can basically have a hash table of what virtual machines you want to create, and then it will create you domain joined virtual machines with static IP address injected, and you can just look into the code and modify it the way you want, right? So I had a customer, and we did all of this scripting with an orchestrator called PowerShell Universal Dashboard, and they orchestrated everything, including the bare metal deployment now, right? So, and basically everything was based on MS Lab. And if I didn't have anything in MS Lab, I kind of wrote a scenario, and then they copied it over and basically are using it in the production.
Neat.
So it's pretty cool.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I wanted to ask about. Like, does anybody use MS Lab to actually get started in production?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So now we are talking MS Lab and no longer VMware, right? I mean, yes, right? So there are so many specific workloads where you want to just create bunch of virtual machines, automate it, and maybe have some like a self-service portal where people will be able to click something, and based on that, you will just run a script and then kick off the virtual machines creation, right? And it's like a Swiss tool, right? A Swiss knife tool,
Mhm.
because I've seen many tools that are trying to do that, but it's not like you. So the tools are more or less meant to do something, but if you have a special use case, I think something like having PowerShell and an orchestration tool is so much better, right? So this customer, for example, they are running just the SQL databases, right? They want people to create t-shirt size machines. So they have t-shirt size machines with multiple disks, and people can just kick off the workflow where they will just create a virtual machine. Then the host is selected, QoS is applied, all of this stuff. There is no product on the market that can do this, right? To orchestrate all of this for you, where you can basically, select your t-shirt sizes somehow and then amount of disks. Well, there is right, SCVMM ish, right,
Yeah,
but it's not perfect. You have to have a self-service portal somewhere, right? But SCVMM doesn't have any. So yes, so uh, absolutely, people are pulling the code from MS Lab for their productions, and
yeah,
this is exactly what I wanted, right? To have an example that you can reuse, adjust, and use for your production.
yep, yep. Yeah, and so like you said, we've gotten off of VMware, and that's okay because really the point of this episode and what I wanted to talk about in this episode is okay, so there's so many organizations right now going, okay, let's look at moving from VMware to Hyper-V or Azure Stack HCI, but they don't know how to start. And the point of this is to say, there are some really easy starting points to deploy this technology in a lab in a very
Hmm.
structured way that's simple. And that same code base of scripts is really easy to tailor just a little bit,
Hmm.
and then use in production.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
then you've got this code base that's tested, and it's also well commented and everything. So if there's issues you need to look out for, there's
And we can
comments and a
discuss
lot
it,
of it.
right? There's a Slack, we
Yeah,
can discuss it, everything, right? So i'm I'm telling it to everyone. I'm open to discussing stuff. I know that the code is, there are some issues in the code somewhere because I, for example, didn't comment something, or maybe something can be done something slightly different way. So I mean, I'm not an expert on everything, right? So everything can be improved, right? So
sure.
sharing is caring. Let's discuss it in a Slack or somewhere, and then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
You can move
yeah,
you can move easily your production because sometimes you don't need much, right? So from the virtualization, what do you need? Virtualization and people be able to access the virtual machines, or they will just access it as a normal server, right, over the PowerShell or whatever. So they don't have to have an interface to start or stop the virtual machine, right? So you can run the infrastructure as an IT admin, and then back up the infrastructure, and then the users can just access their service, and most of the stuff is there, right? The VLANs, how many VLANs, like middle-sized customer needs, like 5, 10 VLANs. You can
right.
do everything with a PowerShell, right? You don't have to have SDN for this. You can just manage
Yep.
everything with the VLANs. And yeah, if you want to have some advanced isolation, you can use PVLANs, right? Uh, Hyper-V switch can do a lot, right? Even without SDN. And now with
Yep.
SDN, that will be available in, I'm pretty sure now there is a SDN Express, right? But I don't like the way it's being deployed. So let's see what the Microsoft will come up with.
Yeah. Yeah, but the reality is there is SD in there today if you have a justification for going to that level of complexity. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think you have some scenarios about deploying SDN, don't you?
There are a few. There are a few. So
Yeah.
it's more or less about deploying an infrastructure, but this is not something you would like to use with Azure Stack HCI, right? So there
Sure.
were some issues with SDN I didn't like. So one is that you have to provision certificates for the infrastructure.
Hmm.
If you
Yep.
use SDN Express, it will use self-signed certificates that will expire in 1 or 2 years. So it's a ticking bomb. And then when I tried to use certification authority to deploy the certificates, you have to still create a certificate that is exportable and then export it and then import it for the I think endpoint, some kind of endpoint that has to be the same across all of the nodes that you have. Not that good, right? So I need from Microsoft to come up with this as a service somehow,
Sure.
and let's
Yep.
see what they will do.
Yep. Yep. So it's there. It has some maturing to do, but
I mean, the
and I
platform
mean,
is there. It's being used in Azure, right? So the control
absolutely.
planes and everything is being used in Azure. So what Microsoft needs to do is just to align it, or let's say modify it for people to be able to use as a product, right? So we are now moving from just hypervisor to the product, right? So Azure Stack HCI now with 23H2 version, it's a product. It's you can control stuff from Azure Portal, and this is the way to go. So Microsoft wants to focus now on or at being able to manage most of the stuff from the Azure Portal, and I think
Hmm.
this is absolutely important. So you will have your true hybrid experience, not like the
Yep.
hybrid on the paper where you have like a Azure Stack ACI somehow connected into the Azure portal. That was version 22H2. But now with 23H2, you have this resource bridge, and with resource bridge, you can create virtual machines on premises with ARM templates and everything. It's a good start, right? It's not perfect, right? But it shows you the way. So that's why I think everyone should look at Azure Stack ACI, and not from the eyes of the what hypervisor is it running, or how it works underneath. It will no longer be your, I would say, concern in the future, right? Because in the future it will be more or less like a black box you will control from the Azure portal.
Hmm.
I think this is what Microsoft wants, right? You still can look into it as a failover cluster that is running on premises, domain joined, and you can traditionally access it with the failover cluster managers. You have the virtual machines running with Hyper-V manager, everything like that. But the future is really in appliance-like experience, where you will manage everything from the Azure portal and use the
Hmm.
same ARM templates or automation as you do use for big Azure or the workloads you are deploying into the Azure.
Yep. Yep. And you bring all the orchestration and everything up, and of course, VMware has their own vCenter, and they have some orchestration tools, but they really don't have this level of kind of hybrid cloud feature set that Microsoft's rolling out here, where it's public and private cloud kind of hybrid, a unified control plane, and this is a next level that VMware, and frankly, I'm nervous they're never going to get there now with the acquisition, but
It's absolutely different world, right? If you think
yeah.
about it, right? So now you will have on-premises infrastructure connected into the cloud, and you can control on-premises infrastructure from the cloud at scale, potentially, right?
Yep. Yes.
So especially for the customers who have branch offices, they will just have some, one or two servers on premises, and then they will be able to push updates from the Azure portal. Like
Hmm.
it was my wet dream since 10 years ago to have just
Yep.
one button to click and basically have a solution where all of the updates will be distributed from the Windows update. Now it's Azure Update
Mhm.
Manager, where you have this solution builder extension package, and
Yeah.
it contains firmware and drivers, and then WDAC policy. So you have a security and drivers being deployed
Hmm.
from the cloud that are validated by Microsoft.
Yeah, that's a
Or
huge deal. That's a huge
that's
deal at scale. Updates and patches, firmware, and the security policies all coming down. Oh, we need to make a configuration change to all of our hosts at scale. Great, do it from
What
do
else
it
do
from
you need?
Azure.
You just
Yeah.
need to have a checkbox that everything is green, right? As an IT admin, that's what you need.
Yep.
The checkbox, everything is green. If someone from the security will ask you, you will just show them or export them, or basically give them access to your cluster to see everything is
Hmm.
green from the compliance point of view.
Yep.
This is
Yep.
absolutely the best thing that could happen to us, right? Who
Yep.
are running Hyper-V for years, and we were begging Microsoft. I remember my talks with product managers from the Microsoft when I was talking exactly about this, right? You need to have a control plane in Azure, but you will be able to control your clusters at scale.
Hmm.
And that's it, right? That's what customers want. They want to have a
Yep.
checkboxes with a green checkbox that everything is fine, and
Yep.
updates from the cloud.
Yep.
And
Deploy new VM, deploy new service from the
yeah,
cloud, and it
exactly.
just works. Yeah. Yeah.
Microsoft is
And
just nailing it since last release, and I know that people are now a little bit struggling with the cloud deployment, the way the deployment is being done now. But I think they are much further away from any other competitor now, because if you
absolutely.
think about this, they basically are reusing the code base from the Azure Stack Hub, and Azure Stack Hub is here for, I don't know, 5 years maybe, and
Hmm.
they merged two worlds together. So basically, you as an IT admin, you want to be in control, right? You want to know, you want to be able to log in into the server and do some basic troubleshooting. Why the heck my virtual machine is not running, right? If you know what a failover clustering is, how storage pool works, how virtual disks works, you want to take a look in your state of the cluster in the low level to just make sure that if anything will happen, you'll be able to
Hmm.
troubleshoot, right? On the other hand, you want to have the experience where it will be consistently deployed by Microsoft. So this is exactly what happened. Microsoft consistently deploys it with this supplemental package, which is basically sets of the scripts that will be running to consistently deploy just the HCI with all of the settings. So you no longer care about lower level settings like, did I configure this registry setting or that registry
Hmm.
setting to, I don't know, enable performance plan in a, or if something, I don't know, but all of these
Yep.
things, if it's not there, raise a ticket with the Microsoft. Hey, you should add, I don't know, um, filter memory pages when you do dump. So the dump will have all of the data except the virtual machines, right? Or something, right? So you don't have to do all of these low level adjustments. It's made for you.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and the other great thing about this, we've talked about scripting, for lab, but the there's this whole movement towards infrastructure as code, and this Azure control plane really enables that too, right? Because now you've got, the native ARM and Bicep that work in Azure are starting to make their way to where you can deploy some of this directly in your on-prem infrastructure from Azure with infrastructure as code, which is really a neat direction too. So you want to talk about management at scale and automation, some really neat things that are rolling out.
Yeah, it's so it has 2 points where it's sexy, right? So it's sexy for the people who are working with the Azure portal, so with Azure
Yep.
itself. So if you have company which is cloud-born and they need to have some workload that is running on premises because they need to have something, right? They need to have some, I don't know, appliance for system for the access for the building, or maybe something, to collect data from the cameras or something. So you still have to have
Yep.
some kind of infrastructure, right? So you can have this Azure Stack HCI cluster sitting on premises and have the same control from the Azure portal. So it's consistent
Yep. Yep.
experience. So
Yeah.
absolutely, this is perfect for these kind of customers, right? And if you have middle-sized customers or small-sized customers, they often don't need some integrations into the SDN or crazy amounts of virtual machines that they need to somehow publish to the users to build a private cloud or something like that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and so this has all been great. And I just want to recap and say, if you're getting started, there are some great starting points with the Dell Geos GitHub, with MS Labs. Don't let the fact that there's some code there scare you, because it's simple to get started. You can start to get hands-on with Hyper-V and Azure Stack HCI.
Yep.
From a GUI-driven perspective, if you want to see dashboards and management consoles and all that, it's there. so don't let the code scare you off. But then the code makes it really easy to reproduce and troubleshoot any issues if you have questions, and really see how it works, because sometimes the code is really the best documentation of how
Absolutely.
does
It's
this
the best
work. So
documentation. Yeah, because the PowerShell is basically, you either set something or get something, but from the words you can see what you are setting up. So, and if it's unclear, there's always a comment in my scripts, right? And if you want, you can always ask at a Slack channel. So I think we will just keep the Slack channel invitation in the comments. So you can
yeah,
just join the Slack and just write there's a separate channel for MS Lab, or you can just DM me and it will just ring on my phone here and I'll be able to reply to you almost immediately. So absolutely, we welcome everyone to start with Hyper-V
great.
or Azure Stack ATI.
Really an awesome community, and I don't know anywhere else you go where you're going to get experts like this just ready to jump in at, hey,
It's two
just
and a half
message me.
thousand people. 2,500 people. It's
Yeah,
incredible, right? So, and a lot of experts from the Microsoft world. It's not only about a virtualization. You can ask almost anything. Like, if you have experience with these switches, right? So there was a question I think in the networking, like,
yep,
yeah, I have this configuration. Can someone help me or something like that? So yeah,
yeah.
there's people talking anything.
But yeah, best community I've been, and I'm part of quite a few different, even Microsoft communities, and I'll say this one is by far my favorite. So it's really neat. Well, let me ask a last question. Any final advice you'd give to enterprises that are wrestling with, what do I do about VMware? How do I get started? I'll let you wrap it up.
It's tough, right? So first thing I would think about is, do you have anyone who is running failover clusters, Microsoft failover clusters in the company? If yes, then Hyper-V is more or less, or Azure Stack ACI is more or less like a Hyper-V cluster. So it's just a failover clustering together with a Hyper-V, right? So you already have most likely some expert uh, in IT admins, right? Or if there is someone who knows how to run Windows Server. Again, Azure Stack ACI is based on Windows Server, the same managing experience, right? So you don't have to be worried, right? So your VMware admins, if they know PowerShell, and they most likely are using the PowerShell because you need to have the PowerShell for the automation. Yes, again, you have someone who knows Azure Stack ACI because half of the Azure Stack ACI troubleshooting is PowerShell, right? And then the only thing you have to do is identify if you have like a virtual machines that you just need to run as the virtual machines. You don't have to expose it as in a private cloud. You just need to have some kind of performance on these virtual machines. Yeah, let's do that, right? If you have some Citrix, take a look. There's an AVD, so you can have Azure Virtual Desktop on premises. Again,
Yep.
something that we can migrate to. So a lot of potential savings, most likely, right? And with the
Yeah.
software assurance, if you have software assurance, come on, you should already run Azure Stack ACI because Azure Stack ACI is virtually for free for you. If
Yeah.
you want to run Azure Arc on premises, connect your servers to Azure Arc and control them from the Azure portal, come on Azure Stack ACI, it's for free. You don't have to pay $10 per core, $10 per server per month. It's for free.
Yeah. So yeah, so many things wrap into that software assurance and cost savings, and that's one of the big pushes right now is people are getting hit with such big quotes for VMware that it makes so much sense to look at Azure Stack HCI or Hyper-V. So well, hey, let's wrap it up. I want to say again, Jaromir, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this. I'm sure this is going to be really helpful to folks that are looking to get started. So thanks again. And if you're listening, come back for the next episode. You can also find more content at richardsoncloud.com. Thanks, Jaromir.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.